Hi, everyone, and welcome to Module 3 of the Grant Administration and Management Training Series, hosted by the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice. My name is Lauren Halili. I am the Program Coordinator for the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice, hosted at San Diego State University. And I'm going to take you through Module 3, which is our Communicating Grant Results, also known as reporting. So I just want to lay out the landscape so far. We are in Module 3. We've had 2 modules released so far that is available on our YouTube channel. Those are Intro to Grant Regulations and Financial Management System. Like I just mentioned, we are currently on Communicating Grant Results, also known as reporting. And coming very soon, we are going to have a module on procurement standards. So our learning objectives today, so after participating in this training module, participants will be able to understand the importance of progress and financial reporting requirements, outline high-level components of a typical progress and financial report, as well as learn best practices for organizing your data and information for successful reporting. So I want to welcome you all to Module 3. In this module, we're going to be discussing various progress and financial reporting requirements, why those are important, and how we can benefit from them, components of those reports, and most importantly, how you can organize your data so that you can easily reference the metrics that you identify that are going to be needed for your reporting. So starting off here and communicating grant results, why do we do this? Why is this required? Well, we do this because it is required under federal awards. And while required, reporting can really be beneficial because you'll be able to actually visualize your progress throughout the grant project period, be able to identify key performance indicators and track their progress. So things like outreach metrics, newsletter signups, social media engagement, things like that. And then also it's really important to track your grant funds, how much funds you're expending, if you're having any sort of income. This is really important to track not only for yourself, but to be able to report to your funder. The requirements for progress reports are often outlined in the grant's terms and conditions. So it's really important to review those when you have any sort of questions regarding your progress reports in terms of frequency, important dates, what are the contents of the reports. Of course, if anything, if you have any questions that are not answered within your grant's terms and conditions, you are always welcome to reach out to your project officer to get your questions answered. So going a little more into why it is required, it's a really good way to update on project progress, reflect on your goals, challenges, and successes that you've had in the past quarter, and more importantly, having transparency and continuation of support from your project officers, being able to share with them what challenges you're going through, what your successes have been, where you could use some more support. This is a really good way to just be transparent with your funders, show how you're progressing in your projects under their funds, and really be able to have an open space to discuss some of these challenges and the barriers that you might be going through. So some example components of a progress report, these are not, I would say, copy and paste across the board. These are just some examples that I've seen in my personal experience. These can differ through each agency depending on who you're funded under. But first starting off with, basic info. This is your grant number, your name, date, just really basic information like that. Up next, we have our project objectives. So what objectives did you set for your project? What milestones were you going to meet? Successes, that kind of goes hand in hand with objectives. Oftentimes that you'll be having to report on how your objectives have been met this quarter, maybe haven't been met this quarter, what support you need to be able to meet those objectives moving forward. My experience, my progress reports have included fiscal information, even though there is a separate financial report that is due. There is some fiscal information that is collected on progress reports, depending on who you're funded by. So having that information ready and anticipating that you might need to provide that information is really helpful to know. Any photos or media, if you're doing outreach events, community engagement, things like that. Any photos, media, sometimes agencies will ask that under progress reports, just to be able to show, again, project progress, which is what this is about. And challenges. So any challenges that you might be having under your project, or any additional support that you might be needed, kind of like how I talked about before, is something that you'll have a space to sort of discuss in your progress report. And like I said before, these are just example components of what you may find in a progress report. It might look a little differently. It might be named different, but this is just a general outline of what you can sort of expect. Okay, now moving on to financial reports. So this is called Standard Form 425, or sometimes they shorten it to SF 425, Federal Financial Report. This requires recipients to disclose cash receipts and disbursements, federal funds authorized and expended, cost share or match fundings required if your opportunity required a cost share or match funding, any program income that you might have, and any indirect cost expenditures. The frequency of submission for these specific reports can really vary between grant federal funding opportunity to federal funding opportunity. So it's, again, just kind of reiterating the fact that you should always go back to your grants terms and conditions whenever you have any questions in terms of requirements of each of these reports. And of course, don't hesitate to ask your project officers questions, because that is what they're there for. Okay, so now going into basic components of our standard form 425 Federal Financial Report form. First is we have basic info again. Again, this is just your organization, contact information, what the report type is, if it's quarterly, semi-annual, or annual, or final. Again, that frequency will be outlined in the grant terms and conditions. Your employee identification number, the account number, all good things like that. Next, we have transactions, which are kind of cumulative throughout the either quarter or semi-annual or annual. Federal cash, so that can include cash receipts, disbursements, cash on hand is what they typically ask for. Federal expenditures, so total federal funds authorized, federal share of expenditures, unliquidated obligations, total federal shares. Again, these are all outlined in the standard form 425, which we will link in our description of this video. Recipient share, and then program income. So these are the basic components of a standard form 425. Again, we will link that form in the bio of this video so you can take a little bit more deeper look into what all of the line items are that you'll need to report on, but just wanted to outline broadly what these components are. So now I want to move into best practices for organizing data and info for progress reporting. Progress reporting and financial reporting, I should say. It's hard to, with everything that we talked about in the beginning half of this training, it's hard to know, what is important to track and what isn't. How can I stay organized to be able to reference these metrics going back in the past quarter, or if it's semi-annual, or you're looking at things retroactively, basically, and that can be really difficult to recall. What have you done? What's the progress been in this grant? So I want to go over some best practices for organizing data that I found that have been really helpful to reference for progress reporting and to stay organized to ensure that you can successfully submit your report on time. So let's talk about organizing for success. It's important to define what your key performance indicators are. These are metrics that really highlight the performance of your project and will highlight the progress of your project. So asking yourself, what are crucial metrics that you need to successfully write your progress report? Again, referring to the contents that are required by your progress report in your grants terms and conditions can really help influence this decision-making on what KPIs that you choose to report on. And then also ensuring that the data that you are collecting aligns with those KPIs that you outlined. So this is a really neat little chart on the right side that kind of goes through the flow of um, pulling data to align with your key performance indicators. So first deciding what to measure on. What are those indicators or metrics that you're going to be collecting or that you need to report on your progress report? Collecting the data, ensuring that your data that you're collecting through your project activities aligns with those KPIs. Analyzing the data, if you're doing any sort of total counts or percentages, percent of folks from a certain region that are, utilizing your services, things like that. Reporting results, that's sort of the steps that we're talking about in this module is reporting those results in the progress report and even in the financial report. And then based on those results on what key performance indicators you're collecting and the data that aligns with it, it can really tell you a story on how your project is progressing. And then you can take further action if you need to make any sort of adjustments or pivots in how you're doing your work and things like that. So once you have those key performance indicators set and you're collecting data, you're keeping all your documents together, how can you organize that further for easy referencing back to? I really recommend implementing a logical folder structure. Again, this is one that makes sense to you personally. You can do folder categories in, say project phases, general categories. You can have date-based folders. I typically use general categories, so you can kind of see on the right-hand side. I have it broken up by outreach event materials, survey data, partnership meetings, photos and media, things like that. So however you want to categorize your folders in a way that makes sense to you, really recommend having folders to kind of chunk groups of documents and media together. Again, ensuring appropriate permissions for different folders are set accordingly. So depending on who's on your team, making sure they have adequate access or restrictions, depending on what team members need to look at what. You can also do some color coding. So a lot of folders these days have that feature where you can color code folder materials. Maybe color coding makes sense to you. I typically don't use it that much. If anything, I will color code something red or green to just flag it as something that's important. But this has been really useful to help organize your documents and find things very quickly. Okay, next, going into those actual folders to the actual documents themselves, having consistent naming conventions has been something that's really, really important and a huge in terms of organizing your documents and referencing back to them. So having a standardized way to name your files that makes sense to you and your team is going to really help with organizing your data. So you can kind of see here, this is a naming convention that I have used since my master's program. I always add the date of the file first. That way, a lot of, say, like Google Drive and your Windows desktop or your Mac desktop, it can organize your files by date. So that is really, really helpful to know the date of which something has been done or completed or submitted. Dates are really important for progress reporting because typically they're in a quarterly frequency, and so you have to look between that quarter. So organizing by date is very, very useful. But anyways, I do date underscore file name and then underscore version if applicable. So an example under this right here highlighted in yellow is I have the date, which is July 26, 2024. I use periods to separate month, day, and year. You can't use backslashes or forward slashes when naming files. Underscore and the file name. So this is a needs assessment survey questions doc. And then underscore version. So I typically put, when something is in a draft phase, I will leave it as draft. Some folks do version 1, 2, 3, etc. I think it's just easier to put draft. If you have multiple drafts, then maybe the version 1, 2, 3, 4 going on forward makes a little bit more sense. Again, this is what makes sense to you and your team. And then when the final version is solidified, then I will do _final. And that just kind of tells everyone like, okay, this is the final version. No changes are going to be made to it anymore. And if there are, then we would kind of discuss that amongst ourselves. But that's the gist of the file naming convention that I use. So I talked about a little bit about version control and doing _draft _final. Track changes is also helpful, adding comments so people can see what you actually changed and you can reference back to that. Microsoft Word has track changes. Google Sheets has track changes as well. It's actually called suggestions, but it's really neat. It highlights your changes in a different color and adds a comment in on what you changed. You can also drop in manual comments as well. And then this is just a little highlight underneath here that I kind of already talked about in the naming convention. Alphanumerics and underscores are your best friends. Special characters just don't fit well in file names and folder names, and the systems just don't usually like that. So having a naming convention that incorporates alphanumerics and underscores is going to be very useful and less irritating when you're trying to name files a certain way. Okay, up next, data management tools. How are you going to manage your data? How are you going to analyze your data? I'm going to go over a few data management tools that I have used before. Starting off with spreadsheets, I would say I've used this the most. So that is Excel or Google Sheets. I will typically use these to organize upcoming events in kind of a tabular way, or survey data results, being able to see that, being able to track community engagement numbers, newsletter engagement numbers, things like that. It's really good for tabular data. And then similarly, it's very flexible. You can really build sort of whatever you want to a certain degree, just because of the formula options that are given with Google Sheets and Excel. The way that you can link multiple spreadsheets together, you can have multiple tabs, you can have pivot tables that consistently update as you add things in, so you get your data in real time that's analyzed for you. Really, really great tool to use. And from that tabular data, you can also create data visualizations. So if you're a visual person, you can create pie charts and bar graphs and line graphs and maps even too as well. So Google Spreadsheets is really great in terms of flexibility and being able to analyze tabular data and visualizing that data as well. Google Sheets in particular, well, actually Google Sheets and Excel, Google Sheets is an online platform. Excel has a desktop version, but also an online platform on Microsoft 365, I believe. And those allow for collaboration. So if you have multiple people that need to work on the same sheet at the same time, maybe in different places because you all are working remotely or in different areas, what have you, it allows for that collaboration. And again, going back, you would have to sort of implement a version control so who's changing what, as well as implementing those permission standards. So I know in Google Sheets and Excel, you can lock certain columns and certain rows so folks don't change it. So it has that feature there, which is really, really nice. And I've used that quite a bit as well. Okay, so going on to project management software. I've typically used these to keep track of activities and timelines amongst a team. Personally, I've used Monday.com, and we used it to outline our tasks, be able to delegate timelines, delegate other tasks, communicate and collaborate on that platform, things like that. I know there's other capabilities of these project management softwares as well, such as quality management, reporting and analytics. There's tool integration as well. I know on some of these, if you're project uses Google Drive, you can implement your Google Drive into these programs and integrate them in that way, so you can kind of have one platform to work off of. Personally, I have only used these programs to delegate tasks, manage project planning, and manage timelines. So if this works for your team, these are available free to a certain extent. I think the more people you add on your team on Monday.com or Trello, then you would have to start upgrading to paid versions to use the entirety of their features. But definitely something to try out on your own and kind of get a feel for it. I know Monday.com Personal Experience has a lot of great tutorial videos that they can walk you through on how to use it to its full potential. But just wanted to highlight these if this is something that your team really strives on using and has used before. These are really great tools to kind of help manage those tasks and manage that quality of your project. Okay, so those are the tips that I have for organizing your data to easily reference back to for progress reporting. When it comes to financial reporting, we did do a whole module on your financial management system and how to streamline that so that that is very efficient in terms of referencing back information for federal financial reports. So you can go ahead and check out that module on YouTube. Our handle is CJ_SDSU. It's titled Streamlining Your Financial Management System. It's module 2, but I want to go ahead and kind of recap a little bit about what we talked about in that module. So in terms of having a streamlined financial management system, your system has to have a way to provide accurate, current, and complete financial data. So being able to track that financial data as up to date as possible and making sure that it is as accurate as possible. Identifying the source and applications of funds. So where do those transactions come from? If you're making program income, where is that coming from too? Being able to source where funds are being expended and funds that are considered program income is going to be really important to keep track of your grant funding. Similarly, supporting accounting records with documentations. So any transactions in the account you have receipts for, save all your receipts, your invoices, your order confirmations. This is really helpful to make sure that you have that first part, which is accurate, current, and complete financial data. And then the last one, which is establishing property management and procurement standards. I'm not going to talk about this one too much here. I really just want to hit home that it's basically really important to keep on top of managing your financial data, keeping track of any transactions, funds expended, funds incurred, and having documentation to support all that. That's really kind of the gist of what I'm trying to hit home here in terms of having that data to be able to easily report back to it for these financial reports. In terms of property management and procurement, we're actually going to have a module that is solely focused on procurement standards and what it means to procure under federal awards. So stay tuned for this. That's going to be module 4, and we're going to be releasing that at the end of this month or so. So I want to just recap some best practices here. All in all, make sure you start off by reviewing your grant guidelines, your terms and conditions, what the requirements for these reports are, what the requirements for your federal financial reports are. And of course, if you have any questions on those requirements or guidelines, feel free to ask your project officers questions. They are there to support you in understanding how your requirements work under your federal funding opportunity. They are there to make sure you are in compliance with everything. They are there to answer your questions. So please ask them questions if you don't know. Identifying your key performance indicators that you need for your reports. This is a really good first step to identify. Once you kind of receive the federal award and you're reviewing those terms and conditions, what are the contents of the reports that are required? What do you need to report on? And then understanding amongst your team what indicators or metrics that you need to look out for and track. And lastly, creating a system or a process to organize that data once you've identified your KPIs can make it super easy for you all to reference, and will make it just less stressful in terms of when reporting comes around, because it always creeps around the corner. You'll be able to organize your files by a certain date and really be able to look at what happened during that time frame. And the retroactiveness won't seem as overwhelming if you have it organized and a system in place that structures it out really well. Okay, I want to thank you for watching our Module 3, Communicating Grant Results, Progress Reporting, and Financial Reporting. This is Module 3 of our Grant Administration and Management Training Series. Just a reminder, we're having a 4th module coming out pretty soon here on procurement standards, so please be on the lookout for that. If you want email announcements on when that module will be coming out, please sign up for our newsletter using the QR code on the screen. We also have our contact information, our website, where you can also sign up for a newsletter on there, our phone number and email. So if you have any questions or want to set up a short intake call, if you have technical assistance needs, we're happy to meet with you. And we have our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, where we also post announcements as well. So I want to thank you all again for watching our Module 3 of our Grant Administration and Management Training Series, and we hope to see you for the 4th one. Thank you so much.